Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another mystery video for my 12 days of Christmas. So in today's case, actually before we get into it, I want to apologize if there's any noise in the background because it's 39 degrees here today, so I'm not dealing with that and I have my aircon on. I'm sorry, but at the same time I'm not sorry because otherwise I would be literally melting.
The following pronunciation is brought to you by pronouncenames.com.
So today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Rui Pedro, and this case, it happened in Portugal and it was like the biggest case in Portugal besides the Madeleine McCann case, and it actually happened quite a few years before Madeleine's disappearance. So when that happened, it kind of made everyone take a second look at this case and I guess open it back up because it's not similar, but they were both young children who disappeared in Portugal, and some really weird things were uncovered that they were kind of similar. And I don't want to give too much away, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into this case. This case was kind of difficult for me to look into because all of the sources are in Portuguese. There's a very few that were in English. I think there was literally like one or two that was in English. So every time I looked at a source, I would have to go and look at it in Portuguese and click the translate button at the top of the web page. And I mean, we all know Google Translate is kind of shady. So if you are Portuguese and know anything about this case and I've mixed something up, gotten something wrong, missed something, please feel free to comment that down below because I would love to know, and I'm sure everybody else watching this video would love to know. So on the 4th of March in 1998, 11-year-old Rui Pedro disappeared from Lusada, Portugal. He grabbed his bike at around 2 p.m. and then he went to his mother's house, which was literally just across the road from his house. And when he got there, he went there to ask his mum if he could hang out with his friend. And his friend was a 21-year-old man. He was a trucker and his name was Afonso Diaz. And now they had been friends for a while, actually over a year. And his family was really, really nice to Afonso. They were really welcoming, invited him over, which I don't know about you guys, but that seems so incredibly strange to me that a 21-year-old is friends with an 11-year-old. I don't know if I'm missing some sort of piece of the puzzle here that they were really welcoming to him, because I know if 11-year-old me was friends with some 20-year-old dude, my parents would not be on with that. It would not be fine. And this Afonso guy was described as really childish, a little bit immature, and didn't act his age. So I don't know, it was just a bit sketchy for me. As soon as I started researching the case, before anything happened, I was like, okay, this guy seems weird. Anyway, Rui's mum said no to playing with Afonso that day, and she told him to just go and play at the lot or the field behind her work because there was this big abandoned ex-race horse track there. A few hours later at 5 or 6 p.m. his tutor called his parents and said that he had never showed up for his 5 p.m. session, and immediately his parents knew something was wrong and got worried because he has never missed one of these tutoring sessions. So immediately they called the police, they reported him missing, and they quickly did a search for him, the police, and they found his bike in the abandoned field out the back of his mum's office. Now, obviously, because Rui asked to see Afonso that day when he went to see his mum and then he disappeared, he was the first person that they questioned, and they brought him into the police station and they asked him if he had seen Rui, and he said no, that he didn't, but he was really sketchy and they found him really shady because he was extremely calm, and there was a bunch of witnesses as well, Rui's friends, that said that they saw Rui talking to Afonso in the abandoned racehorse lot. So these witnesses reported seeing Rui talking to Afonso in his black Fiat Uno, except the Fiat Uno actually wasn't his car, it was his brother's car, and his brother had lent it for him for the day. And here I couldn't get the correct translation. I'm not sure if he had to go to some sort of yearly appointment for himself or he had to go to some sort of yearly appointment or servicing for the car. I'm not sure what kind of yearly appointment you could have for yourself. So I feel like it was something for the car. Either way, there was a yearly appointment that he had to go to and he never showed up. Instead, he just spent the entire day kind of driving around aimlessly. Also, apparently the spot that he was seen talking to Rui in was the exact same spot that Rui's bike was found immediately after they started searching for him. So he was definitely looking very sus at this point. Now, after questioning him at the station, he was still there when Rui's grandfather confronted him, and it was so heartbreaking to read this, but he was distraught. He was so emotional, and he was just pleading for Alfonso to tell him where Rui was, and he was saying he would literally give him anything or do anything for him to tell him where Rui was. And it was so emotional that Alfonso started crying, and he was very like choked up, and he said he didn't know where Rui was, but if they did want to find him, they would have to close off all of the borders so that no one could get out and no one could get in, because he was probably going to another country. Rui's cousin Andre also confronted Alfonso at this time, and he was talking about some sort of conversation that they had, and this really started to rile Alfonso up. He was yelling at him, threatening him, telling him not to say anything, and it made a lot of sense why when I found out what Andre said. And basically he was confronting him about a conversation that Alfonso had with Rui and Andre, where he was trying to take them to go and see some prostitutes. And this happened like either the day that Rui disappeared or the day before Rui disappeared, and Andre couldn't go because his mum wasn't letting him out of the house that day. Now this case started to blow up. It got heaps and heaps of media attention, and people started calling in leads and sightings and with information, and at one point they got like a video, and it was supposedly a video of Rui in a hotel in Benidorm, which is in Spain. And they also received a call, and the family says that the boy on this call sounded exactly like Rui. Like they were convinced that it was him. And basically on this call, it was a little boy saying, like, just crying for his mum and asking for his mum repeatedly. And then apparently they heard the phone being taken away from this boy and hung up. And his parents at this point were getting so incredibly frustrated because the police weren't doing anything. They weren't taking any of these leads seriously. They weren't following up on any of them. They didn't try and trace the call that they thought was Rui. They just weren't being proactive at all. They weren't being proactive in the search. They weren't treating it as if it was a kidnapping. They were treating it as if he had just wandered off and run away or something, and they were just trying to get him to come home. Like they weren't treating it seriously. Like it's honestly crazy to me that they didn't go and search Alfonso's brother's car or his house, or Alfonso had a girlfriend, maybe go and question the girlfriend, see the girlfriend's house. Like it's just so insane to me that they just weren't doing anything. Like it's so obvious that something was wrong. So anyway, about a month later, a journalist named Nuno Rogelio went to Disneyland Paris with his family, and he was obviously taking lots of photos because that's what you do when you're visiting somewhere, going to Paris. And in one of the photos, it was really weird because in the background they were like in a Pinocchio ride, and they were all sitting down in the ride, and then behind his family there was a photo of a man dressed in red with a little boy dressed in black who looked just like Rui. And I'm going to put that on the screen for you guys next to an actual photo of Rui, and you can tell me what you think, if you think it was him or not. Personally, I feel like it kind of looks like him, but at the same time I'm like, how stupid would somebody have to be to take this kid to Disneyland when there's like all this media coverage about the fact that he is missing? I don't know, it's a little bit weird to me. Maybe they thought that it wouldn't be an issue because they were in Paris and thought that people wouldn't catch on there, but something doesn't seem right to me. Okay, so here's where it starts to get a little bit weird. In September of 1998, the American and British police busted this massive online pedophile ring called Wunderland Club. Now this club was an online club, and they had hundreds of thousands of photos in this database and videos, and they had like live streams going on. Like it was the biggest online pedophile ring in the world. So they were actually busted when a little girl named Allison was assaulted by her father's brother named Ronald Reaver, and he took her into his computer room and sexually assaulted her on camera while broadcasting it to the Wunderland Club. And they were all watching it, and they could send messages of requests which would pop up on his screen, and he was like doing these requests and stuff, and he was actually caught. And when they caught him, they obviously seized his computer, which is when they found the address of a man named Ian Baldock, and he was from East Sussex in England. Now, English police went and raided Ian Baldock's house and they seized his computers, and when they did, they found out all about the Wunderland Club. And the Wunderland Club had over 120,000 indecent images of children, mostly under the ages of 10. And on top of that, they were like an invitation only club, and if you were invited, you had to send 10,000 child pornography photos to be accepted, and then the people that were already members had to vote to see if you were allowed into the club or not. It was just a really fucked up situation, just a really fucked up, disgusting situation. Anyway, when they were investigating this club, they found photos of Rui on the database, and British police were worried that he had been abused or even killed, possibly. To this day, these images of Rui are the only sort of evidence or strong evidence that could point to what happened to him or to his whereabouts. Now, what's crazy about this is that the British police, his mother, and the national news all confirmed that this was Rui. And he was one of 16 children that were positively identified. But the Portuguese police didn't look into this at all. They didn't even give it a minute of their time. They just dismissed it completely. It's just honestly crazy to me how bad of a job these police did. It frustrated me so much while I was researching this case, and like, I know that in a lot of these videos, there seems to be a common theme of police not doing the right thing, not investigating properly, or missing opportunities, or stuffing something up. But this, honestly, to me, just seems to take the cake. Now, another really sketchy thing that I discovered when researching this case, and it's not entirely related to this case, but I just kind of wanted to mention it because it kept nagging at me. So in 2002, there was another pedophile ring that was busted, and in this pedophile ring there was a bunch of government officials and celebrities, and there was also a guy named Irish Dave, and I don't know if he was taken in or if he was busted or if he was released or what, but he was living in Algarve, which is where Madeleine McCann disappeared for, and I don't know, something about it just kept bugging me that I just wanted to mention it. I don't know, it was just like there's these pedophile rings, and clearly a bunch because there were so many that were busted in Portugal at this time, and there was this guy who was literally living in the place that Madeleine disappeared from. I don't know. So anyway, back to Rui. It wasn't until 2006, so literally 8 years after his disappearance, that they formed a new team of investigators to start looking into this case and taking it seriously. They finally began building a case against Afonso, and by February 26 in 2011, he was charged with aggravated kidnapping. Now, his pre-trial began on November 17th, and I don't exactly know how like it works in Portugal or what their like kind of law system is like, but the way that I read it was kind of like a grand jury where you have to present to a grand jury the evidence so that they can decide if you can even go to trial, if there's even enough evidence, if it's worth a trial. And at the pre-trial, they determined that there was enough evidence and that the trial could go ahead. And so it started on the 6th of June in 2000 and the same year. So what they said happened is that although his mother said no, he went to hang out with this guy named Afonso. Apparently, he waited in the abandoned lot in the abandoned racetrack for Afonso to come, and he came at about 3 p.m. He left his bike there and he got in the car with Afonso. So when they were driving, they went via Highway 106 to Las Dosa, and when they got there, they met with a prostitute named Alcina Diaz. So Afonso told her that Rui was 14 years old, and he offered to pay her 2,000 escudos, which is about the equivalent of 30 Australian dollars, so that she would have sex with Rui. But when he got out of the car, Rui got out of the car, he was just clearly very nervous and he was crying. So she took him away from the car for about 15 minutes out of eyesight of Afonso so that he thought something was happening, but really nothing was happening, and she was just trying to comfort Rui. And Rui told her that the man in the car was his uncle when Afonso and him aren't related at all. And he said that he forced him to be there, and she was trying to comfort him and asked where his mother was, and he said that his mother didn't know that she was there at all. He was there at all. Then after about 15 minutes, she took him back to the car, and as soon as he got back to the car, he started crying again, was clearly very uncomfortable and nervous. So when they left, she thinks that they went about 500 meters down the road to a brothel, and she had previously tried to tell this to authorities, but she didn't know the name of the man in the car, so they didn't take her seriously until this new group of investigators was formed to look into the disappearance. And at trial, they showed her photos, and she was able to positively identify both Rui and Afonso. Now, there was another witness named Maria Di Fatima, and she worked at a local fire station, and she said that on the day of Rui's disappearance, she saw him talking to a man at around 2 p.m. in a little black car, but she couldn't identify the driver. Now, this bit, I had a little bit of trouble with the translation, but apparently she saw him at the police station when he was there for questioning all those years earlier, and he admitted that it was him that she had seen. And then she said that Rui had apparently met with Afonso before he went to go and visit his mum to ask his mum if he could go and see Afonso. So they had already had like the day planned out or whatever. And then he met with Afonso again after he spoke to his mum. Then she said that after she saw Afonso at the police station and he admitted to her that it was him he saw talking to Rui, he came to the fire station where she worked, and he started asking her really weird questions like, do you know who I am? And do you know what my car looks like? And he was just acting really sketchy. Then apparently after all of this, at around 6:45 p.m, he went to his girlfriend's house, which was in Frumundi. A bunch of Rui's friends also testified that Afonso was obsessed with Rui. They said that he was really possessive and always wanted to know where he was and what he was doing and who he was with, and he wanted to know these things in advance. Like, he wanted Rui's daily plans. A few of his friends also said that they saw Rui getting into his car because they were meant to be playing football. So instead of playing football, Rui cancelled on them and instead went and hung out with Afonso. These kids, Rui's friends, had actually told police this at the time of the disappearance back in 1998, but again, just like with Alcina, they didn't believe them and didn't take them seriously until there were these new investigators in 2006. Rui's sister also testified, and she spoke about a time that was about a year before Rui's disappearance where Afonso was taking photos of her and Rui, and she thought it was really weird because he'd never done anything like that before, and I couldn't really find much more on that testimony, but I don't know, that was a bit shady to me. Maybe he was like scoping them out, maybe he was part of a pedophile ring and was sending photos to, I don't know, get approval that this was the child they wanted to take. Rui's doctor also took the stand, and this was really sad because he said that Rui suffered from epilepsy and that without his medication it was likely that he would have an epileptic fit and that this would do severe damage to his brain. Now, Afonso's alibi is really weird because he says that Rui didn't get into his car, but 3 of his friends did. He says he drove them to a nearby city called Pacos de Ferreira, and after he got there, he kind of just sat in his car for a little bit before he got out and went for a little walk around and did some window shopping because he thought that city was beautiful and really loved it, and then he went back to his girlfriend's house. Now, he was actually acquitted in February of 2012 due to lack of evidence. They said that Alcina's testimony was lacking in evidence, lacking consistency, so he was acquitted. However, in March of 2013, the Court of Appeals, contrary to his trial decision, sentenced him to 3 years and 6 months in jail for abduction, and he served only 2 years and was released in March 29th of 2015. And I don't know, like, I definitely don't think his sentence was enough at all. But I also understand that there's no physical evidence to convict him beyond a reasonable doubt. But at the same time, it's so frustrating because it's like the police didn't do their jobs. They didn't look into it properly. There was so many leads that they didn't follow up on, and so many, my mic's still on good, so many, they didn't try and trace a phone call. They didn't check his car. They didn't question the girlfriend. They didn't get onto it in time until like 8 years later when, it's too late at that point. And I just feel like not enough was done. I feel like, personally, I think that he is guilty. There's just way too much evidence against him. I understand that it's not physical, but it's just a really frustrating case because there could have been evidence if the police's jobs were just done sooner. From this, Rui's parents actually founded the Association for Missing Children in Portugal, and they have helped so many people's and children's lives. So I guess at least something good came out of this, and there can be something nice at the end of the case to tell you guys. But that is everything for today. Please let me know your thoughts. Let me know any cases you'd like me to cover in the future, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.